And I love the segue into the question about the education system. You're all talking about teaching, starting from childhood, starting from the very beginning. So the Canadian education system is obviously another area that is critical in the fight against Islamophobia. Many teachers are unfamiliar with Muslim culture and may inadvertently spread bias among students by making pointed remarks or asking inappropriate questions, as you mentioned, about hijab, for example. Universities have also become a site of increasing violence against Muslims. In a 2015 survey, over 36% of Muslim students at McGill and Concordia universities believed they had been targets of discrimination. On the other hand, universities can also be a wonderfully supportive venue to bring about awareness, such as when Western University staged a walkout and demonstration against Islamophobia. What are your thoughts on the Canadian education system?
Okay, since I was talking about education, let me go for it. No, actually, yes. As I said, you know, it's education should start from kindergarten and start with respect. But what is important is they haven't done any survey at York University. I'm sure that the percentage would have been over 40%, because I know I've seen my students, and they really say that, you know, they are constantly, and I myself as a faculty at York University, I'm not protected against Iranophobia or Islamophobia. I experienced double. I mean, as an Iranian woman, I experienced it, and as a Muslim woman, I experienced it. So we need to have a revolution in our education system. We need to start teaching not the 3 R's of this education. We need to also teach them the 3 C's of education. The 3 R's are reading, writing, arithmetic. So easy, everybody can teach that. Everyone, you don't need to have a license to teach that. The 3 C's are important, which is care, compassion, and collaboration. We need to teach them these 3 C's at a very, very young age. I'm not suggesting that they would. I am actually against teaching religion to kids at a younger age. I believe that they should be taught respect at younger age. They should be taught about human rights, that it is you're violating someone's rights when you say such a thing or you do such a thing. But religion should be taught academically at university level. Believe me, if they want to teach it at high school, they better invite me and Memona to go and teach it. Islam, Judaism, Hindu faith, Buddhism, all these religions that they teach at high school level, and teachers, they go and they just Google it and they get something and they go and they teach it. That is not teaching their religion. Teaching religion, you need an insider to go and teach the religion. Unfortunately, this is the academic level that I'm telling you that Islamophobia exists at academic level. There are books, there are articles that it's covertly creating fear against Muslims. And these books are used at university level. Anyone can teach religion. This is the idea. This is no. Anyone cannot teach religion. Islam should be taught by someone who knows Arabic language. It should not be taught by someone who doesn't know Arabic language and goes in order to understand the Quran, uses, translation of people that they have their own contribution to the translation too. So what we need, in my opinion, is a revolutionary, critical, education. I'm a Freirean. Paulo Freire is a Brazilian educator. He believes that teachers oppress the students. Students are oppressed. Why? Because they teach them what they are supposed to teach, as if it is, and he uses the term banking system. He says they throw knowledge to the students as if they are depositing money in the bank. And it's not useful. They are oppressing them. Education should be teachers helping the students to get involved and bring their own knowledge into the classroom. Paulo Freire says this oppressor, who's the teacher, is also oppressed by the system. So he suggests a critical education is an education that helps the oppressor to realize is oppressing, and the oppressed realize that is oppressed. It's the end of the oppression, and the beginning of liberation is the beginning. So I believe that our education system at every level, no matter what, is oppressive, is not providing critical education for students. They are going to be like, our future depends on them. We better do something about it. Seriously, we better do something about it. I myself, whenever I'm driving, I see the kids passing by, I stop. I said, please go, because my future depends on you paying taxes. So it's an investment for all of us, every one of us, and the government to invest, have citizens who have compassion. And with this education system, we cannot accomplish that. This is, I didn't want to be pessimist, but I believe we need a revolution in our education system. I'm totally done.
Go ahead, Nazanin, please.
Thank you, Memona. And sorry about my laptop and my phone all making weird stuff. I agree with Minoo. As I was reflecting on this question, I remember in the summer when the graves were found, the graves of the kids were found, and how many decades Indigenous folks have been saying that you've taken our children. And my white friends who were born in Canada, and they have been here their whole lives, they started to share that these were shocks for us because we didn't learn about these in school. We thought that these were over and it was in the past. And as I was reflecting on this question, I kind of hit a little bit of that pessimism that Minoo was talking about. Of yes, we're not getting the information that is correct. Education is another arm, the same way that the Ministry of Children and Families is another arm of the colonization and upholding white supremacy. And these might sound very strong for someone who's not working in the field, but this the teachers didn't pick and choose. They were told not to. Teachers don't pick and choose how to address
I think we might have lost Nazanin.
Okay, I can go in, and then when she comes back, maybe we can have her pick up then. So this, you know, the Canadian education system and Islamophobia and these pieces, I think, is what we're discussing. So I think what we have to start recognizing, and Minoo and I think Nazanin started to address this, is that our education system, whether it's at the elementary or at the you know, post-secondary level, there is a hugely Eurocentric focus on our education system. What that creates is a very alienating experience for not only just a Muslim student, but for any a non-white student. And so, you know, and this comes back to where we started, ideas of race. And our ideas of race are often informed by social, political, and economic practices, and not by biology, right? And so when Minoo talks about starting at kindergarten, it really does start at kindergarten. And how do we then start offering a counter narrative and think about how to build a really authentic experience for students, whatever level they're at, whether that's at kindergarten or whether that's a grad student? And how do we start thinking about disrupting that hegemonic narrative, whether we're educators or administrators or community stakeholders? And we know that research has shown, at least from the Ontario Human Rights Commission, that one of the contributing facts for a disproportionate amount of colored students being expelled within the system is because of a lack of representation amongst the teaching body, right? And so despite the amount of diversity increasing within our student body, it's not equally being represented within the teacher body. And we need to see that change happening. And we know, for example, I will put a plug in here, in my own experiences at the Muslim Association of Canada, the Ontario Ministry of Education actually, you know, this happened post London attacks. There was a funding pot that was allocated, and we were able to collaborate with the ministry on creating an Islam awareness project. And a lot of our work there focused on having educators think about the implicit biases that they carry. And I think that we really need to start becoming conscious of that. And this discussion of where Islamophobia comes from, and, you know, I think some of this will help situate that. And so that's one thing, thinking about our thinking about our implicit biases. I think we have to think about how to actually advocate for increased diversity within classrooms, in terms of who is the person of authority in the classroom, and is a student seeing themselves represented there, right? And we've seen a lot of studies, and these are both from Muslim youth as well as non-Muslim youth, contributing factors to mental health and identity. And when students do not see themselves reflected in those positions of authority that are standing in front of them, the impact that has, even this kind of double personality syndrome that Muslim students feel quite a lot, right? That they have, they walk into their school space and their name is called a certain way. When they come home, their name is called a different way. I think most of us have experienced that. And again, it's not just Muslim students, it's so many. And then how do you actually identify and build and preserve your practice of Islam? And again, there was a study that Muslim Association of Canada, along with IRSS, did in 2020 on Muslim youth. And one of the things that Muslim youth reported was that teachers who made space for their Islam, who were sensitive to the traumas that Muslim students were experiencing due to Islamophobia, were a source of resilience for them. And supported whether that teacher was Muslim or not, that validation. And so then that was a source of resilience and helps them navigate not only Islamophobia, but other challenges that they were facing related to their own identities. And so, supporting this piece around helping Muslim students live that authentic identity, preserve, and then practice. We know that there's Muslim groups on campus often, so many groups, identity groups that exist in schools and on campuses. And I think supporting that is one piece that we really need to think about. And I think the last thing that I'll really say is thinking about the implicit is the three pieces, is the implicit biases that we have, and thinking about those, thinking about how we build shared narratives and we normalize that narrative, thinking about engaging Muslim stakeholders in reevaluating the policies at systemic levels. So it's not enough, as Minoo was saying, it's not enough to just have somebody that's visibly Muslim at your table. It's thinking about how you get mobilizers at your table and thinking about people who have reach within the communities that you want to engage to bring you valuable input and then inform the policies and the vision that you create collectively, right? And so it's moving really beyond the token representation. And I really like what Minoo was saying. It's about care, compassion, and collaboration. And how do we then enact that practically? I'm going to pass it back to you, Nazanin. Sorry, I stepped in.
I'm very pleased to see that you stepped in. There's construction downstairs and the internet is coming and going, and thank you for being understanding. Just wanted to add to the conversation around implicit bias by 2 examples that I've experienced. I don't think I have much to add in terms of points in the reform or revolution. Like there's debate around like if reform or incremental change is even helpful at this point. But
I have an issue with reform. We talk about it later.
Yeah, no. No, we need revolution. I went to see a doctor for my skin and we were just chatting. Very nice, lovely, knowledgeable doctor. And she was like, oh, where are you from? And so I was like, I'm from Iran. And she was like, wow, you're so lucky to be here.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, what do you know about me? What do you know about my life before I came here? What do you know about what brought me here? And that's the kind of racism, that's the kind of implicit bias that we experienced. I think much earlier there was a comment that, you know, minority of people are bad or racist or something like that. And I really recommend moving away from that there's like a minority of bad apples who like do harm. Yes, there's a minority of people who do violence. I believe that there's minority of people who cause physical harm to other people, publicly, privately, much higher stats. But publicly, like there's a minority of people who run people just because of the existence. And I think there was another incident in Toronto in the Iranian neighborhood that there was another driver who just like started like, but it was an insult. It was a bit of a difference. Like
that was a mental.
Yeah, misogyny and Islamophobia are different a little bit. But no, we really need to accept that we were all born and raised in societies, regardless of where we were born, in societies that teach us discrimination, prejudice, and hierarchy. Regardless of where we were born, we all were exposed to racism, to discrimination, to ableism, to ageism, to homophobia, to transphobia, to misogyny. Different degrees, yes, absolutely. Different experiences, absolutely, but we all have experiences of that. So that doctor, no one told her about implicit bias. So she already had a story about me as a woman, especially I took it very personally as a woman who's from Iran, who's from a Muslim majority country. She already had the story, and she already had a story about Canadians living here. As if oppression doesn't exist here. As if women are absolutely free and liberated here. That's not true. We see that in politics, we see that in media, we see that again if you work in gender-based violence. It's appalling. So there's this story about what's happening in foreign countries that are Muslim and what's happening in Canada because we're the land of the free. That's one story. The second story is when I was first, I came as an international student. I was in UBC. UBC has a mandatory English test for people who didn't graduate from an English-speaking high school, which I have a whole thesis on xenophobia about that in my mind. One day, maybe I will write that down. But I was writing this test and there was a question that to this day it still shocked me and no one believes me. And I ran to the student council. I ran as the representative in student council just because I wanted to follow up on this question, and no one from the administration actually like gave an answer. Very interesting experience I had. And the question was, recite 3 stories from the Bible. And I read that and I was shocked. I just couldn't believe it. And like, unbelievable. English test exam to examine the level of my comprehension. And how Islamophobia actually shows up for me is sometimes of the reactions we don't see. If that question was recite 3 stories from the Quran, I'm pretty sure it would have not gone unnoticed. And sometimes it's in the reactions that we don't see. No one raised any concerns about that question, besides me like years later when I ran for the student council. And that's one of the ways that we can also see the difference in normalizing and who we have a strong reaction to and who we don't. What is normal for us? What's appropriate? What's okay for us? What's okay for people to get away? And what's not okay for people to get away? So if we flip the question and it was from recite a story from Quran, students would have flipped, I'm pretty sure. Examiners would have flipped. No one flipped. And that to me is another way that xenophobia shows up. That's another way that Islamophobia shows up. White supremacy shows up. Normalization of Christianity even shows up. There are still no exams and classes on Sundays. In BC, there used to be no selling alcohol on Sundays. Why? That's my dog, and there's construction. Why? So it's very much perpetual in our society, and we need a little bit of that revolution to bring this stuff out, beyond everything, also like in addition to everything, in terms of education and school system and the content that Memona and Minoo talked about.